thing is, it's all downhill for Mystery Inc.
No! Hey, you're doing that thing again where you take everything I say out of context. You're trying to make it look like I think Coolsville sucks. No! Don't record that!
All
So corny.
had to say was,
I think Coolsville sucks.
the city's recent.
Where are you?
How's it going, everybody? Welcome. I'm the Soul Carney. Today we're going to be talking about Scooby-Doo and why the original series worked and will always be a classic. So I recently have started thinking about Scooby-Doo again for the first time in a very long time when I remembered this old game I used to have back for my PS2 called Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights. As I understand it, this is typically considered a pretty classic kind of childhood nostalgic game for people of my age. I immediately knew I had to play this game again, but the name of this video isn't Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights. The name of this video is something to be determined later. This video is about the original Scooby-Doo series, the series that Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights pays a beautiful homage to. So the original Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? And What's New Scooby-Doo, which is a reboot of the original Where Are You that took place in modern era and was a prominent show in the early 2000s, and I remember watching it as a rerun and probably towards the end of its original running time. And as a kid, I always had a disc that had the first 5 Scooby-Doo Where Are You episodes on it. Scooby-Doo has been a big part of my childhood and my upbringing, and is probably my first exposure to horror as a genre. The original Scooby-Doo Where Are You follows pretty similar themes throughout the entire show. Every episode is roughly the same, just with a different mismatch of characters and locations, things like that. But generally speaking, the formula is similar. The gang finds a place that is haunted or has a spook or specter. The spook or specter encounters them, and then they try to trap it, and they eventually do trap it, and it is revealed to be someone that they met later on who is some disgruntled caretaker, or someone who is, generally speaking, trying to either scare people away from an area or make people come to an area so they get money. Generally speaking, there's some sort of money play within the villain's motivations, and they go to jail. There's a phenomenally interesting film theory about Scooby-Doo Where Are You? That has to do with the show taking place in a dystopia, in a post-depression where most people are poor. And I don't know, it's a very interesting theory. I don't know all the ins and outs of it. I might do a video on it at some point. But no matter what, at the end of every original Scooby-Doo Where Are You episode, the monster is revealed to be a person in a mask or some sort of suit. The first time this changed was in a 1990s or 1980s show called 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, and I think it was like a 13-episode little mini-series with just Shaggy and Daphne. And Shaggy had a red shirt on and blue jeans, and I don't know. It's very weird. I remember watching this as a kid and just thinking, this is odd. But despite that, all the ghosts in that were real. And it was a pretty forgotten series. I don't think many people saw it when it originally aired. So that's why we get what happened in the 90s. In the 90s, this movie came out called Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. Now this is a certified hood classic. Everyone that I've ever heard talk about this movie loves it to death. So that is why I will not hesitate in saying I don't like this film.
I think Coolsville sucks.
I don't like the voice acting, and I don't like it for one other reason. But mainly with this one, it's the voice acting. But this Scooby-Doo movie was monumental because it was the first popular Scooby-Doo film, or Scooby-Doo anything, where the monsters were real. It is revealed in one horrifying moment that the zombies that are attacking them are real. These people turn into like werecats. They're like real witches. There's like these voodoo dolls of all the gang. And it is a doozy of a Scooby-Doo movie. And from this point on, a trend started of making all of Scooby-Doo's monsters real. I feel like this was an attempt to sort of make Scooby-Doo more gritty and scary. And in a way, it does that. But in another way, completely cheapens the scares and undermines the entire point of the original Scooby-Doo concept. Scooby-Doo is probably one of the most classic examples of a genre known as children's horror, and possibly even one of the first. As far as media is concerned, visual media is concerned, there has always been children's novels that were terrifying. Look at any of the Grimm's fairy tales. But Scooby-Doo meant something in that it was one of the first children's horror cartoons, or children's horror shows that they could watch on a Saturday morning. Since then, there have been things like Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark, and a handful of other things. Every cartoon or Disney Channel show seems to have a Halloween special, and I can remember a few that are rather scary in my memory, but all of those owe a debt of gratitude to Scooby-Doo. And the thing that made Scooby-Doo scary was that the monsters weren't real. Put yourselves in the shoes of a kid. What does a kid know about people? Not much, but people are generally good guys. Adults are, at least. At least adults that they know. Adults that they know are good guys. You know, there's some stranger danger that's taught to kids. Otherwise, adults are good guys. Adults they know. And then there's monsters, and there's ghosts under the bed, and there's monsters in the closet, and things like that. And these are very real things to certain little kids. Or at least real fears that they have. Whether they believe it or not, you know, who knows. But monsters are scary. Monsters do scary things. Monsters do mean things. People they know don't. These are things that monsters do. And then think about this subversion of the kid's expectation whenever the monster's mask is taken off and there's a human underneath. So to a kid, the monster being revealed to be a person isn't a relief. It's a shocking, terrible thing. When the gang gasps and says, "Old man, whatever," the child gasps and is surprised along with them. This is someone we met earlier in the episode who, to us, seemed trustworthy, but this has been the culprit the whole time. So as a kid, watching this show, all of a sudden, all your walls of comfort are torn down. For the first time, you realize that maybe the adults that you trust aren't who they seem to be. The message of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? And what it tells the kids is that the people around you who you know the most are possibly not who they seem to be, and could, in the end, be the real monster. Statistics would prove that this was true. A majority of the people who commit murders and assaults and molestations of children, or kidnap children, or anything of the sort, are people who know them well, and people who the children know well. As a kid, and I think even as adults, we have this idea that kidnappers are people that will drive by in a van and just grab any kid they see off the street. And while this can be the case, it is oftentimes more likely that it is someone the child knows very well. This is a very dark reality that when a lot of adults are presented with, they tend to deny. But Scooby-Doo finds a way to package it in a way where even kids can understand. The lesson this show teaches kids is a dark one, but it's an important one. And it does it in a very entertaining and very funny way. And that message is undermined by a different one whenever the monsters are real. Now, I'm not saying monsters are real equals bad Scooby-Doo episode, because my two favorite forms of Scooby-Doo media are the two original Scooby-Doo 2000 movies with Matthew Lillard and Freddie Prinze Jr. and Sarah Michelle Gellar and whoever the heck plays Velma. Oh, what was her name? But anyway, those movies are phenomenal, and they feature real monsters. So it's not the real monsters that makes it good or bad, but Real Monsters does take away from the sort of dark message that Scooby-Doo always had. It makes it a little more lighthearted and a little more monster movie-ish than what the original show actually was. The thing that made slasher movies so scary when they first came in the 70s and early 80s was that all of a sudden this idea of some foreign monster and some extraterrestrial or some supernatural entity being the horror of the show, it was suddenly someone from the neighborhood, someone you know, your everyday man. It was suddenly extremely realistic, and at the time, extremely terrifying. Now, we watch these slasher movies today and tend to just look at them as very cheesy but very good, just classic movies that we don't really get scared from anymore. But let's really think about what makes these movies scary. Michael Myers was someone that people knew from the town until he killed his sister and was sent off to a psych ward. In the original Friday the 13th movie, every time we see the killer's POV, they appear to be an innocent stranger. Until the death of the camp manager, when he says,
Oh, hi. What are you doing out in this mess?
someone these people know, or at least appears trustworthy to these people immediately, is the one doing the killing. That's what makes the slasher movie so scary. At least Friday the 13th and Michael Myers. It's a real human being. Although later, you kind of, like, Michael Myers may not be truly all non-supernatural. And the same with Jason Voorhees later on. But the original premises of the first movies, I'm not a big fan of sequels.
Sucks.
But the original premises of the first Halloween and Friday the 13th are that someone people know is doing something terrible to those people. And while that is terrifying just from a visual movie standpoint, it's also terrifying when you think about the real things that happen to real people. The real bad things that happen to real people. They're usually done by someone that person knows. In 1957, citizens of Plainfield, Wisconsin were in shock when they found out that their mild-mannered, kind of oddball neighbor, Ed Gein, was a true monster. Ed Gein was a very sick person. He was someone that the town trusted. In fact, when he was arrested, he was sitting down at a family in town's table having dinner with him. Alfred Hitchcock's film Psycho, based on Ed Gein, is one of the first horror movies that shows a real human being the real threat. And he's not supernatural or anything. He's just a guy, but he's doing terrible things. Psycho is often marked as one of the first slasher movies, so we can lump that in with what I said earlier about Halloween and Friday the 13th. The general premise of the slasher film is that it's real people doing really terrible things. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is another great example. As I understand it, the original premise of Scooby-Doo was to be a lot more dark, but they opted for a more light-hearted comedy children's show. But it still maintains an extremely dark message that people are the real monsters. This came out in the late 60s, and this was a time when children would have been subjected to what was going on in the world at the time. And this was Vietnam, this was Watergate, this was the Kennedy assassination. All these terrible things happening in the world being caused by real human beings and not some big scary monster. This was a reality that kids would later on, sooner or later, have to come to terms with. And I think this is what Scooby-Doo sought out to help do. Help kids come to terms with, or just realize that the real monsters are people around them that they know. Kind of a bleak message, but a real important one for kids to learn. When I originally set out to make this video, I was trying to somehow make the point that adding the monsters, making them real, made it more scary, but the more I thought about it, the scarier it is that it's a human being under the mask. What would drive someone to do such terrible things? And here Scooby-Doo stays silent some of the time, but it's in the subtext. It's often someone who's down on their luck or looking to make some extra cash, motivated by greed, brought on by poverty. Scooby-Doo tackles some very heavy themes, and as I've said 100 times before, does so in a way where children can process the information and they understand. It's only when we get older that we kind of look down on Scooby-Doo as like, it's a kid's show. We don't really think about the message of Scooby-Doo. I think Scooby-Doo's had a profound impact on America as a whole, and I think by making the monsters real, all we do is cheapen it. If the monsters had been real all along, I don't think Scooby-Doo would have the lasting legacy that it does now. But because it tells us something real, and because it tells us something real scary, it's lasted as long as it has. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.